June 9th, 2023, Gfile.News. Federal government overreach and overstep in the Donald Trump indictment over classified documents sends chilling global sign of national security disunity as a National Archives Act process is critiqued in public purvey. Declassifying documents by process. That is what is going on. It's not West Wing or some episode of Suits. Real people who work real jobs, which involve real mounds of paper, have industry standard processes. It's like how someone cooks chili being critiqued while in the middle of the first real ingredient stirring. There is zero criminal intent, zero victims, and a former president is indicted over paperwork and how it is stored at his residence during what any mature adult knows as a transition period. The charges are a disgrace. It feels like someone's taking our mother and father's patriotic underwear out of their drawer and taking pictures of it just because they can and blasting them all over the internet. Prosecuting him is un-American in this regard. Top secret documents behind the locked doors of a private premise for proper processing by a former president, and he's charged. Did we forget he has security cameras, private residential security, and likely Secret Service details at his home? These were sufficient to consider the process kosher, particularly when compared to other former presidents. Yet we as Americans have pictured our top secret documents now taken and been blasted all over the internet. What kind of message are we sending regarding the actual essence of national security when we project by our own internal agents that a president can't work from home? Given I've been told to be tactful with regards to refraining from too many comments that may provide offense, Jack Smith Esquire's 2 minute soapbox gibberish is frankly offensive. He kicked his head back a few too many times in what seemed to be a glimmer and the pride of life, from my perspective of him. Perhaps, however, it was a sigh of relief or two that I just missed. Anything, though, for that moment of razzle dazzle and the vain pride of life is what it seems to be to most neighbors of our species, and I think he'll grow to regret it. Zebras show black and white elementary law nonsense perspectives, if you ask me, and they razzle and dazzle for political perspectives. And that appears to be what's happened here, a jack in the box. Yet there's still time, a deal of dismissing all but one and allowing for a null process as an honor of the separation of powers, with a caveat that Trump admits he delayed in seeking counsel about where to store the documents while a classification dispute existed regarding the National Archive Act. Very plain, very simple. That was obviously the good faith intentions from an objective reading of the fact pattern. At worst, it's a breach of the standard of care. It does not even seem to be that, but rather a matter of timing in the process. And again, a mockery, I would say. To take it best, a mistake in delaying this one area while Trump has attack after attack after attack, which occupy his time and attention, is just frankly disrespectful of our former president, his time and the executive dignity due to the office. As a former service member with family that served in wars and fought for our nation at life's perilous risk, yet back in the box, Jack. Another puppet show masquerading as the execution of justice. But to a trained adult in both law and the military, it appears as a passive aggressive scandalizing in this regard. To claim that these actions are helping national security while putting on display disunity and disregard to the honor of the office of president, that is the very vulnerability foreign nations critique when considering America's resolve and ability to maintain patriotism in the midst of political disagreement. Jack put himself in the identity box of a black and white first level cognition thinker and how he applied the law. It makes zero logical sense from a military perspective, which is why there are separation of powers. Did the Department of Defense request this of Mr. Smith? I think the circus is a threat to our troops abroad, frankly. These were neatly organized boxes, which could have been seized by administrative process within the time period where there was a dispute over the National Archive Act's application. And who does not protect his own home even more securely than his office? Well, that is where the most prized possessions lay, particularly his family. It's just a few turns, however, of the allegorical Jack in the Box's desired narrative, and another politically charged actor of sorts using a position to frame a script for smiles on camera. And the world, not just conservative Americans, but the adult world watches in disbelief. Specifically, imagine to an Asian culture the idea of such public mockery of an executive officer seeking to do what he believed his job was, and at best acknowledging the challenge he had in deciding what was and may should have been prior declassified acts. Imagine Russia. Do we think these global citizens look at Jack Smith and the Justice Department as being interested in national security? They laugh over their chicken and rice with the most sincere of reasons in places like India at news like this. It was not a politician selling out of his national or state's secrets as they would expect. Rather, this is what we have: a Jack in the Box joke, scandalous, political, agenda driven prosecution of a former president of the United States. There were no criminal intentions in the conversations recorded used to indict him. He says he's trying to sell nuclear secrets. No, he never said anything similar to that. Did he say anything about offering over information for exchange of money? No, never said anything like that. It seems to me that the man was stating in the simple terms that he believed as the rightful president or as a prospective candidate running again, that he was protecting America because he was disputing how the National Archive Act should be applied. Yet the lever turns and music cranks. Jack jumps out of the back room box, delivers a moment of vainglory, and yet another scene in political theater is unfolded. It's getting kind of annoying to most productively working Americans. Yes, not everyone believes that any radical bent application of law is of economic wisdom or an otherwise in good faith balance. From just a general framework of the spirit of the matter, consider the investigating body made public that a housekeeper said, oh no, which was quoted as if there was some revelation being unfolded, while the entire context showed a box overturned and some pictures indicating that there were files that were spilled out. I'd be concerned too if I had agents from any authority come to my workplace and begin to remove the boxes of my boss, specifically when they're neatly stored and it begins to look like some are getting knocked or turned over and treated with disregard. Now, that may sound self-deprecating, but perhaps God also willed, as I share the reality that I've faced similar removals and returns with the absolute disregard for the law, because my firm had a prima facie debacle itself where files were removed, no inventory was provided, and they were just dropped back off. To forego the disparity to the pitiful efforts of fulfilling a minimal standard of care, there was, in my situation, no chain of custody, no inventories, no respect whatsoever, just the boxes returned, and they were banker boxes. Well, I maintain that Trump, if you consider the minimum standard of care set out by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act and all the other confidential protected information processes, the only disputed issue is a geographical location that should be mocked. Are we so dull to say that an unused bathroom in a locked mansion of a former president is not secured? Because there's tile on the walls, or perhaps because the boxes were placed on a wooden floor in another room? Is that the concern? Should have not been that the situation deals with perimeters and who has access to the files, And if someone accesses the files, would that person be known by way of video surveillance or camera? Should they have just been stored in metal filing cabinets in a basement under a slab of concrete and he told to report there and sit at a single chair desk that allows him only certain movement to review these files as he processed the National Archive Act? These mental expectations of file storage just sound absurd. He met the minimum criteria. My firm has a Gfile.News system, and we were actively representing, advocating on behalf of civil rights clients and the general public that mirrored all the scanned documents with the hard file documents. They'd be placed in banker boxes just like you've seen there. And that's following 25 years of critique of the processes of medical offices, seeing at West Point how documents would have been stored, presentations would have been made, how files would have been carried, when there was officers coming to present to us, cadets, new weapons, to include even night vision and uniforms and things that were being used. There is no possible way to live in the real world without moving paper and files. And Trump is, in fact, the corpus, and those documents are, in fact, public property that he was storing at his residence lawfully and justly until he could finalize the proper method for transitioning what was classified and what was not classified per his own words and testimony that were misused against him. Therefore, these people are insane in their application of law. They continue to do the same thing and expect some different result. Imputing these negative intentions and playing the paperweight game is getting old. So say most Americans. Let Trump win, lose, let him run. That's what Americans are asking for. That's what democracy is all about. The Constitution is a rule of law, and a transitioning commander-in-chief was at odds of how to best handle nuclear secrets and other classified documents. In the hallways of West Point, I can assure you the disrespect shown by the Justice Department to the Department of Defense's commander-in-chief formerly, or perhaps some argued and constitutionally that he still is vibrating in the souls of these young men. Trump is not accused of seeking again to sell nuclear secrets. His plan was clear: to protect America. And so imagine world leaders. How much respect do you think that they're going to have for our military unity? We can't even figure out what we need to keep in the kernel that's inconsequential. What parts to legally cover is to so maintain the best interest of national security versus revealing and broadcasting, virtually inviting criticism of our nation's ability to internally govern. It's shocking that they're not able to see this. No class, basically. One can mock Trump all they want, but at least he has class. If some policy preference was breached within a company, internal corrections or how he would have handled that situation, or at least an inquiry internally to ensure that there was a proper step taken and allow for response, but not when the government's critiquing their former commander-in-chief. This few of us, we the people that are causing the divide, need to stop. The few in authority who like to eat Trump are doing just that and mocking our nation while doing it. In fact, even Trump's statement of, I can declassify documents by thinking about it, is not laughable or to be made fun of by others unless you're a fool and misunderstand the actual context and application of how law works. Trump was saying in his leadership process as president, if his intentions are decided in his mental faculties to declare a document declassified upon review to fall under the National Archives Act, well, it ends up officially in process being declared just that, eventually through the process, precluded from the requirements that it actually be written or memorialized in that very moment. He'd made the mental decision and in the process was going to have it properly be memorialized and done. And I'm certain the box of documents that Mr. Trump's demands for there to be feedback were ongoing because he was receiving letters and was communicating with his staff as to how they should best handle securing these national secrets, not handing them over to anyone, which would be the basis of the law of protecting secrets. So rightfully so, a busy, successful person like Trump has yet another hurdle thrown up. Can you imagine in American football if someone were to walk up and see two teams participating actively in the sport and then come back up at a later time and everyone's just standing around in different huddles? They would be confused. But the reality is that Trump has been criticized in a similar fashion. The misapplication of the context is just eerie to consider. Boxes of documents which his eyes should see if he is to make a proper designation of what becomes a declassified document. These are used against him as some form of a crime. The damn boxes show how much he intends to finish the job with, how he detailed he was going to go through them document by document to ensure that what needed to be declassified was. And he even quoted that if he could have prior made a declassification, he would have. And it seemed to be he was seeking an opinion as to whether he now could declare that particular document under the National Archives Act. So yet again, a total lack of class and civility by a few within our American government. Just the pictures of such a nice home and thought of a man wanting to work his final boxes in the process after having potentially been stolen from the office by way of a rigged election. And this is what our federal government does, a few within the Justice Department, a few blind guides. It's embarrassing to national security and the common decency doctrine of House business. This was nothing improper and nothing was done wrong, given the fact that there was a dispute about the application of the National Archive Act. And yet some heavy-handed people use control patterns and seek to scandalize and impute a criminal intent or a breach when a man is simply trying to make sure he properly informs the American people with a declassification of records that we may take an interest in, while maintaining that there's government corruption within the federal branch. So if he is taking government corruption and exposing it, or was going to expose it, the American people should consider this not just simply as an outlier and a rogue attack, but a subversive act against the Constitution. And that seems to be objective, because you can't preclude that Trump was trying to do his job. Former presidents carry Secret Service details with them for life because the office is a calling, and every word spoken and deed done remain as an extension of the duties understood before even running. So this is a mockery, a scandal beyond description. Take pictures of his work while he is away from his bench grinder and mock him for wanting to do his work. The bench grinder of documents, wherever they're boxed, as long as the minimum prongs are met of ensuring that there are premise barriers, active people around, and cameras are available for a follow-up investigatory review if there is a breach, is the standard of care. But they mock him. Damn pitiful, and no class and no civility. It's just histrionics, a rush to judgment. These will be the pictures that in the future look like the Prohibition days of men pouring out good beer on the streets when all the common folks say, what a bunch of fools, what a waste. Specifically wherein the intentions here to have the documents in his home would fall under that federal act. So they're playing a game with him, and it's childish, and they're playing a game with the American people. Trump has clearly done nothing morally wrong or even procedurally wrong from what I can see. Yet the federal government, for global military leaders' eyes, just lay down bare documents for pictures and say, our nation is this divided. And by the way, we don't even know how to respect our former commander-in-chief. Because I can tell you from experience with plenty of military men and time and conversation, if an Army guy reads this from another nation, he immediately thinks disrespect and disorder. It is out of order to indict and prosecute Trump, who is in his normal process, which Biden, Obama, and all the presidents were expected to conduct post hoc, after office. It is such a sickening disrespect, and it feels like some weirdos went into our president and first lady's house like underwear sniffers. Why are you going in a mansion's locked perimeters, specifically their bathrooms that are not used but were designed to be used. That's part of their personal touch in their private residence, when he is actually utilizing that space to try to secure documents for national security. Again, it feels like a bunch of traitors pretending to protect national interests. Imagine in years to come the sons and grandsons and daughters of Jesus Terriers that will say, yeah, I was a part of the team that raided the former president's house to critique how he stacked national classified documents for a National Archive Act foregoing review. Not a single person prosecuting Trump will be able to lift his or her head over to one of his family members or friends when the story comes up, or even the name Trump comes up. Even if they convict him, which they won't, but for the sake of psychological realities of humans, every person involved feels the lump in their throat and the gulf in their stomach. They question, why did they do something like this yet again? And it makes them feel unsafe. It's similar to the family members of Bull Connor in Alabama that are not proud of what he did. Yes, he had the authority to turn the hoses on young protesters. And besides that, I'm sure Mr. Connor was a nice man. I do not know. But he acted under color of law, and that was a mockery and an indignity. So there you go. Another saying that played out in the theater of Get Trump, which will turn out for his best interest. Yes, he will endure the stressful moments of thinking how these scandalizers have sought to frame him up out of context and otherwise distract him by yet another sideshow. But he should prevail by law. That is a dangerous path to take, should it not? It becomes a literal matter of national security to not honor his discretion in physical location so long as secured for transition classified documents under the National Archive Act were being reviewed or were in a review process. There was nothing at issue about these documents being transferred that would be adverse to actual national security. Thus, for the sake of dignity and integrity of America, constitutional law, separation of powers, in this unilateral, targeting defendant attack on the taxpayer's dime, as you do it on our former president. Peace be with you. Trenton Garman, Gfile.News.